Hello, dear viewers. Max from OpenAI Technology is here. We are continuing the series of podcasts with the moguls, veterans, and legends of IT industry. Right now, right now, as you can see, we have Mark Knowlton from TechScreen, the veteran in the space and the person who I'm sure has the huge amount of interesting things to share about his career, the state of AI, as well as the interesting details of tech operations. Hi, Mark. How are you doing today? Where are you calling from? And just whatever.
Yeah, great. Well, Max, thank you so much for inviting me here. So I'm actually reaching out from Abilene, Texas. Just recently relocated, so I'm just getting acclimated to the Southwest, and it was kind of nice but weird to wear shorts in the month of March. I recall back when I was in high school. I grew up outside of Boston, and I remember when I was, I think, a freshman in high school, we actually got 10 inches of snow on Mother's Day.
Oh
So
my
the second
God.
week of May. So yeah, so Texas is a little different, but I'm super excited. We've got a lot of great things happening in TechScreen, and certainly AI is at the focal point of what we're doing. And I've just recently uncovered some absolutely astonishing data that will have a huge impact on IT hiring across the board. It's on one hand, it's very troubling, but it also represents just a seismic opportunity to improve the efficacy of how well companies hire technical professionals. So, how's that for a starting point?
Mhm. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yesterday I found the information from some definitely reliable source that software developer is still top five of the most in demand jobs all over the world. So even though everyone says that AI is taking over, yes, it is, but software developers are still needed, and that's not the only kind of technical job, but yeah, my point is that the mission which TechScreen is on is as relevant as it has never been before. And
Oh, I couldn't. Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree.
as a matter of fact, you, as no one else, knows the pain of having the troubles during the recruitment process because you began as a tech recruiter in the 90s and eventually
Yes.
founded TechScreen. So, could you maybe share with us what inspired you to make this transition?
Oh, absolutely. It's actually kind of an interesting story because people generally get into recruiting in one of two ways. Like the first way is being hired as a new grad, right? So somebody comes out and they have like a business administration degree from Boston College or someplace, and they can't get their ideal preferred job. And at some point they realize, okay, I have to get a job doing something. And a lot of times they find recruiting because staffing companies are generally willing to give anyone with some potential a chance. And of course, it's a numbers game, but that's the one primary way, one of the two primary ways people get in recruiting. The second are the career changers. That was me. I started my career as a writer and editor in the newspaper business. I went to Northeastern University, journalism major, got a co-op job, meaning, I got a job in my field of study
Yeah.
with a local paper, whatever. So when I first got into a staffing company in '96, I had no technical background whatsoever. In fact, I vividly remember my boss at the time. One of the things that office did when somebody got a job order, they would just yell out like, "Hey, I got a new network engineer," and they'd yell out some of the requirements. And I remember when my boss said TCP/IP, I thought my head was going to explode. And I turned to my colleague, Monica, I says, how do you remember all this stuff? Don't worry about it. You'll just figure it out. But I had pretty quick success there in the staffing industry, but I wound up getting recruited into a high-end Microsoft solution provider. And this is where everything changed. So I was now hiring internal people, employees for the company. And the two co-founders were super technical. And I had brought this candidate in for a C++ developer position. And I was horrified when I left my office and I looked up and I saw the our admin escorting the candidate to the elevator to go after about 3 minutes. And so I panicked. I ran down to the CEO's office and I said, Frank, what happened? What, did he take a swing at you? Did he swear? What happened? And he just looked at me with this really dry sense of humor. He said, dude, if I interview one more person like that, I'm going to shoot you in the head. And so there was just enough seriousness in his tone that said, you know what? I have to figure out some way to do some of my own technical due diligence. So we had hired, or I had hired, two middle tier developers who turned out to be just absolute stone killers. One went on to Microsoft. In fact, I think he's still there. Another went into the Java world and was at JBoss, and he was a team lead. And it's just absolute open source royalty. But at the time, what I did was I used to sit in the room when those two guys would just absolutely unload on developers. And so I would sit there and I'd write down the questions. And then afterwards, I would debrief them. Said, okay, what are the answers to these questions? But tell me, what does this question tell us about that person's knowledge? And give me an example of how that translates to, if they don't know this, that means they couldn't build the following. So put some context around it, right? And so I just would sit there and then I made a nuisance of myself. I would ask questions all the time. I would pull guys aside and make them whiteboard stuff out for me. And I had always had this mutant ability to remember vast amounts of information. Like when I was in the first grade, 6 years old, I could tell you the U.S. presidents in order. If you said 19, I'd say Rutherford B. Hayes. If you said 7, I'd say Andrew Jackson. And so I just had this affinity. But now I was applying that facility to a body of knowledge that I could actually monetize and actually use professionally. And so over time, so I just became a sponge. I read the white paper on C#. I read the white paper on Java. Many of my friends were developers, so there's one guy in particular, I would tag along with him. He'd go to Microsoft Code Camp, which would be on the weekends, it would be these big presentation. Guys would do presentations 90 minutes long on deep dive stuff. And so I became a pseudo technologist in my pursuit of knowledge without actually writing code. So over time, I cultivated that. So I was doing just absolute drill down, no holds barred technical interviews. Well, I worked at that time primarily for agencies, but I split my time between agencies and then I'd do some consulting where I'd work directly for the company. And it was then that I saw the huge impact of being able to accurately do real technical due diligence on a candidate and be able to present them to the manager. And I'll give you a great example. So I was working for an agency. It was probably 2006, and we had a client, a major telco. They're looking for a C++ Unix developer, and the manager, he was one of these guys who he was cocky like a fighter pilot. Oh, it's like we have a knockout rate of like 95% because we have such a high bar. Almost no one can even get it past our front door. And so I posted the job like you're supposed to, and a candidate applied, and this person had not written code in 4 years. And I looked at the resume and I said, oh, I know what happened to this guy. He's one of these guys who missed the web. He tended to go to these wonky hardware centric engineering shops and then the dot-com era just finally collapsed. And then he just hung on to any job he could. I think it was in production support at the time. But then I stopped myself. I said, wait a second. I sound like one of our customers, making excuses on why this person wasn't worthy of anything. I said, this guy took the time to read our posting. He actually applied. I'm going to call this guy up. And I went in with very low expectations. In fact, I'm going to, so I went in and I ruthlessly screened this guy, and he did great. And so I was able to, and I'm going to share this with you. I actually kept the content of the email that I sent to this client. So if you, would you mind if I shared my screen for just a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure
Okay.
our viewers are gonna love it, and we'll press the like
Okay.
button for it.
And so, oh wait, no, let's see, I have to share entire screen. Boom, boom. Okay. This is the actual email content. It's like I was convinced his C++ knowledge would be too rusty, but I was wrong. They will start with some softballs and memory allocation and access privileges, and he handled them without blinking. Then we got into function overload and overriding, nailed them as well. Then we dug into memory management. That's where the rubber really hits the road, because this manager was named Sirkan. And then we got into, why do you need to, copy constructor and assignment operators when you're dealing with dynamically allocated memory? And he nailed it cold. And I was able to finish, was like, I'm convinced this guy is worth your time. So this candidate, whose resume screamed run away, wound up generating a $22,000 placement fee. And most recruiters who care about their time and have an ounce of sanity would never have called this person. So it was examples like that really told me that the manager will respond if they have evidence. Now, Max, you seem to have frozen. I'm hoping you can hear my audio okay.
Mm,
Okay, so
yeah,
you can hear
let's
my
try it
audio.
out.
Okay, but the video froze. But my point was, now I had concrete evidence that if you provide the manager with real evidence that the candidate is worth consideration, they generally will be willing to give them a shot. And you think about it, say you're a technical person, Max. Think about, how do you make decisions when you're designing and deploying a technical solution? You make your decisions with data. Can I
Absolutely.
test this? Can I reproduce this? Can I measure something? Can I, and you make decisions based on, okay, well, my data is telling me that I should go path A and not path B for the following reasons. Okay. But what happens when you read a resume? This is not data. I characterize a resume as almost as metadata, information that describes a use case, that you can draw some useful conclusions about that, but it's not evidence, right? So let me give you a little. This is I didn't plan on doing this, but Max, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but this is for the sake of our audience. When was a resume invented? It's okay if you don't know it, you're not supposed to know it, but I think you'll be pleasantly surprised when you hear who invented the resume.
The interesting thing that I do remember from our previous conversation, but
Oh, yes.
I think
Yeah, it's
that I'm supposed to say no. So,
that's
no.
right. I forgot that we. Okay,
Yeah,
so for the sake of our audience, the resume was invented in 1542 by Leonardo da Vinci, and the way it came about was that da Vinci had his scientific research and work funded by wealthy patrons, and when he would approach a benefactor who he hoped would fund some research, they would ask him about his accomplishments so they could see, okay, what is it my money is going to be buying? Can you tell me about other wonderful things you've been able to accomplish? So he literally, on a piece of parchment, he listed out some of his noteworthy achievements. So when the next time he met with a wealthy patron, he'd say, okay, here's what I want money for. Here's what I'm going to build. Here's the great benefits it's going to provide, blah, blah, blah. And then here's a listing. So the patron could at least refer to a bunch of accomplishments. Some of them they may have been familiar with. Like, okay, wow, this looks great. The resume hasn't changed. However, the recruiting industry has historically relied upon the resume, and with some minor exceptions, exclusively using the resume to present to a manager as their business case. It's almost, think about like if you were an attorney and you wanted to make an argument in court. Here's all my evidence. You should make a decision based on what I'm presenting to you. And the managers have to read a resume and then make an educated guess. In fact, I recently did a poll on LinkedIn, and I was curious. Now, this is the kind of thing, if you ask anyone who's been in the recruiting business for any length of time, say, hey, how long do you think a manager reads a resume? And everyone will give you an answer based on their gut and their real life experience. And they will tell you something, and they'll say it with confidence, even though they might have actual hard data to back them up. I went and got hard data. I ran a poll on LinkedIn recently, and
Anonymous one.
it was anonymous. That's correct. So that's why managers could freely chime in. But basically was, asking a manager, and the use cases. So a manager has open positions. They have dozens of resumes to consider. How long are you reading an individual resume before you say next? And I'll share my screen again. Entire screen, boom. And I'm going to go to the beginning. Can you see?
Yeah.
Were you able to? Could you see that?
Yeah. For those who are
So
listening, yeah, under 10 seconds.
So 50%, 50% of the managers are getting rid of that resume in under 10 seconds, and another 25% are only taking between 10 and 30 seconds. So think about that. How much time does a manager actually spend on a resume compared to how much time did the recruiter put into not just presenting that candidate, but they have to go find them, reel them in, convince them to work with them, then qualify them, then button them up and present them to an individual opportunity. And think of all that work. I mean, I would estimate that a recruiter working with a candidate in that full life cycle, and then from the time the candidate either gets placed by that recruiter or they find another position on their own, or they just kind of part ways because they weren't getting traction. But easily a recruiter is going to spend probably 3 hours a month per candidate, right? Imagine having 3 hours of work just blown into a black hole because a manager chose to spend 8 seconds on a resume. Now, and just to give you a sense of scale, I had some numbers from the TechServe Alliance. I'm not sure why the animation didn't, but the TechServe Alliance is an industry research firm, and what you're seeing right here are from an operational report. The TechServe Alliance is, I would call, kind of like the Gartner group for IT and engineering staffing. Now, Mac, can you see my screen?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. And so
Some
what this is
red
showing,
lines
yes,
emphasizing some
and
points.
so these are from, so the Tech Serve Alliance has been tracking the IT staffing industry for 25 years. And each of these paragraphs you see, each of these graphics you see here are from individual years. What this one shows is the submittal to start ratio. And in this top one you see here, it's 11.5 to 1. And the one below is another year where the submittal to start is 13 to 1. So think about that for a second. A 13 to 1 submittal to start ratio. The recruiter had to spend just as much time with the 12 candidates who did not get an offer, but only one of those candidates out of 13 actually generated revenue. All right. So think about this. The same statistical probability as pulling an ace out of the deck of cards. And what you have to understand is those numbers that we just showed you, the number of interview submittals behind these numbers is staggering. So let's make a few assumptions. So let's say in the research being done to produce these operational reports, there was, say, 450 individual staffing firms who contributed to these numbers. And let's assume there was there was 5 recruiters per company. Not a big number, right? What that means is that many recruiters, which would be 2,250 recruiters, and let's assume that they are submitting the number of candidates to meet their objectives, which would say, in this case, 40 submittals a month. That's 2 a day for a recruiter, not a big workload. So what these numbers represent, so 2,250 recruiters making 5 subs, making 40 subs a month, I mean, that's 90,000 submittals a month. That's 1,080,000 submittals in a year. Okay. At a 13 to 1 submittal to start ratio, your hit rate is about 7.6%. Or another way to say that, Max, is that in this particular year, there were 996,000 rejected candidates. Okay. Now, only one thing can be true. Either every single one of those recruiters were hopelessly incompetent and had absolutely no ability to accurately match a profile for a candidate with a job spec. They don't care about wasting their time, and they have absolutely no interest in money, and they are submitting candidates they know are hopelessly unqualified. So either that's true, or the process the managers are using to review candidates is just completely undermining all of the efforts of the recruiters. Which is more likely? It's the latter. It's because the managers just
I'm just very
revealed to,
respectful to
yeah,
recruiters.
yeah, no, well, of course, because recruiters, with any training, are going to be in the ballpark when it comes to just comparing a candidate's resume and a spec. Okay, so they're going to be in the ballpark. They, of course, care deeply about their time. They have professional, pride in wanting to do a good job. They care deeply about their time, and they certainly want to make a lot of money. They have every reason on earth to submit as good a candidate as they possibly can. So the point here is that our poll is the concrete evidence that shines a big spotlight on the fact that if you rely exclusively on the resume to make 100% of your argument, then you are completely at the mercy of a manager who right now, their objective when reading a resume is to be done with it as fast as humanly possible, right? It's almost like, I can imagine, some guy is sitting at home on a Sunday. He's a big football fan, and his wife has been beating him up, say, hey, the leaves are all over the front yard and the driveway. Could you just get rid of them? And so he runs out at halftime, gets his leaf blower, and just goes wild trying to clear the driveway of leaves and be done as fast as possible, because his objective is to get back and sit in his lazy boy to watch the second half of the football game. It's not to do a pristine job of of cleaning up his driveway. He just wants to be done with this transactional activity. That is the mindset that the manager takes into resume review. It's almost to the detriment of the candidate's chances of standing out. So that's why I'm so passionately excited about how our product tips the odds back in favor of the recruiter who's representing the candidate, because our system was designed to provide the manager with concrete evidence of the candidate's worthiness and technical competence. So the manager has actual data that they can use to make a decision. I mean, it's not that the manager wants to exclude candidates who might be qualified, is that they just don't have the time to spend, 5 minutes doing a deep read on every single resume, especially if they have a stack of, 6 or 7 dozen resumes. They have an internal recruiting department giving them resumes. They've got 10 vendors who are firing resumes in, and they have to figure out, for their own sanity and the preservation of time, they have cobbled together their own methodology by which they read resumes. And so with our AI Verify platform, we can help recruiter not only create and conduct a detailed technical interview. Our AI Verify acts almost like a technical co-pilot for the recruiter. Now, the recruiter asks the questions, but AI Verify is actually listening to the entire conversation, and it does 2 important things. First thing it does is it converts the audio into a transcript, and then it compares the transcript of the candidate's answers against our curated database of concrete truth about Java or C++. I mean, we have about 140 IT skills with questions and answers. And so we're going to be the tip of the spear in helping recruiters present an evidence-based argument to the manager. But the beautiful thing is that the manager can still stick to their methodology of, let's say the manager, is only going to take, anywhere between 10 and 30 seconds to scan this individual candidate. And in the past, it would have just been the resume with their collection of buzzwords. But with AI Verify, they're going to be able to read an analysis of how the candidate actually responded to a relevant technical question that hopefully, if our user was using our tool correctly and built an interview that was based on that manager's technical stack and preferably on their technical requirements. And so now the manager has actual evidence. In fact, if you'd be open to it, Max, I'd be happy to generate a live demo so we can produce a Veranalysis report on the fly. And apologies for noise in the background.
Yeah. I think if it's not gonna take more than 5 minutes, because we have
Oh,
some
it'll
other questions then.
yeah, no, it'll be much less than okay, so let's see. Screen, entire
That's how
screen,
fast
boom.
TechScreen's operations are.
Yep. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna. Oh, I was logged in as the admin, so I'm just gonna log in. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, Max, I'm simply going to simulate an interview. So I'm going to pick Java Advanced. I'll make myself the guinea pig. And so here, AI Verify. Now, we have integrations into Microsoft Teams, into Zoom, but I'm just going to use a local file upload because what I'm going to do is I am going to act as if we have a candidate in a Zoom call and we're just asking the questions. So I'm just going to imagine that the candidate's given answers, and we're asking the question. Oh, I thought I hit that. All right, very
And
good.
those options during the interview, the candidate is provided with these options, yeah? Or is it?
No, this is no this is the script for the recruiter. The recruiter sees this. They're asking the question, and they're keeping up with it. Now, the beautiful thing is that it doesn't matter if the recruiter is doing an expert job at keeping up with and accurately capturing what the candidate says, or if they're not, because AI Verify will be completely independent of whatever the recruiter does, but they get to hear the answers from the candidate, and so they're getting an experiential learning session by hearing. Imagine if you ask 20 Java developers to explain garbage collection. Well, guess what? You're going to hear 20 different answers. So now we're at the end. I am going to just grab an audio file from a previous interview that see an advanced Java recorded interview. So we're just going to upload this into AI Verify. So now we come here. You can see now we just generated. Now let me grab a system clock. Grab clock. Okay, let's put the clock on. Now, the candidate got a 94. So we have a scoring algorithm that's not based on AI. So you saw as I was checking the boxes, our scoring algorithm will give credit for how much the candidate knew and how well they explained themselves. Now you see here in the Veranalysis, it says processing. Now, real quick, so originally our platform would generate a report that was exactly what the recruiter selected. So the idea was to give the manager the resume plus this report so the manager could see, okay, what questions did you ask this candidate? What parts did they get? What parts did they miss? And how well do they articulate themselves? So when we deployed this solution in 2016, our idea was like, let's give a recruiter a report they could share with the manager that actually gave them more evidence as to whether this candidate was worth their time. So the manager could at least read through and gain some insight into the knowledge of the candidate, something that with their resume, the best they could do is just hope that they were making a correct assumption, but they still were relying exclusively on the resume. Bang, you see that? Let's see, where's our clock? Boom. Okay, so I'd say maybe about a minute 40 or so because we didn't start the clock right away. Now imagine, interesting, AI Verify gave a slightly better score than I did. So imagine if, as a recruiter, you had the script so you knew what question to ask. You could do your best to follow along, but you don't have to worry about being hyper accurate because AI Verify is going to do this. So the manager can listen to the candidate they chose, but now the manager can see a detailed analysis of every question. It correctly highlights the interface-defined types. The abstract class evolved more easily in the interface. However, delivery lacks comprehensiveness and only covers 4 benefits, did not provide additional details that could enhance understanding. So it's making editorial observations the way a manager would. And so now think about the information the manager has when considering. Now, let's say the managers still want to stick to their 20 to 30 seconds of assessment. But now they can go in and see how the candidate handled a question like garbage collection. And that, like, if when I was screening the Java developers, if I only had one question to ask them, this is the one I would ask. This would give me the most information about their knowledge of the language and the runtime environment by simply doing an analysis on how well did they answer the questions. So we want to provide a recruiter with the ability to ask questions like a dev manager and then do a deep analysis like a dev manager, except the only requirements they have, there's 3 requirements. Number 1, they have to have an internet connection. Number 2, they have to be able to read the English language. Number 3, they must have the ability to click a mouse. That's it. And of course, they need to have our platform. But the point is, we have completely lowered the bar, and we have democratized technical due diligence at scale. It's almost as if you had your own private dev manager by your side every single time you went to interview a technical candidate, and you could present evidence of your candidate's worthiness, regardless of whether their resume stood out from a crowd or not. But quite frankly, given what we now know about how managers actually, quote unquote, read resumes, there's no time for them to form a legitimate, qualified opinion of that candidate's worthiness. They're making their just a gut impulse on whether they think this person's worth a phone call. But now we've leveled the playing field for all recruiters to be as technical. But I wanted to, like, I happen to be rock stupid and mule stubborn enough to take 20 years out of my life to create this mutated version of the species and could do my own technical interviews without a script. But I don't think anyone's interested in doing that necessarily, but they can inherit those capabilities with a couple of clicks, and it just completely change how companies assess and qualify candidates in a much more fair and much more accurate manner. But the beautiful thing is it fits into the workflow that already exists for the recruiter, who's still going to be screening people using Teams or Zoom or something like that, or Skype or whatever, WebEx or whatever someone uses, or Google, Google Meet. But they get the benefit of having that AI co-pilot right next to them that's going to do all the heavy lifting. And the more the recruiter's asking these questions and hearing the answers, they're going to start absorbing their own knowledge by osmosis. And they're going to retain that knowledge by whatever they are able to do it naturally. But their fallback is that AI Verify is going to write the report for them. And so that company that, all those firms that had a 13-to-1 sub to start ratio, imagine if her staffing firm could take their submittal to start from 13-to-1 down to 4-to-1, they could triple their revenue on the same amount of work. Now, who wouldn't want to have that capability?
Only those who do not appreciate their time, and I think those
and don't care about making money.
Yes, aka nobody. Yeah. Well,
so
I think it was the most expensive answer to the question to the question, introduce yourself. I think now people are astonished with. Well, first of all, I can say from my perspective, it's insanely useful to be able to get the grasp of what is the candidate's expertise very fast and accurately. Because as you mentioned, TechScreen has very big how did you formulate it? It's IT interviews database. So basically, AI Verify doesn't come up with the conclusion just randomly, but pulling the
Yeah,
data
exactly right.
from
So, but
reliable
I'd been
sources.
building. So I did my first technical interview in 1997. So I've been amassing libraries of technical questions that I've been using in my own personal career for decades. And so I know that these are valid, right? So I'll give you an example. When I consulted at a company called Pegasystems in 2009, I hired 80 full-time software engineers, and I did it by making 117 submittals. I only needed 117 candidates to get 80 full-time hires, and I boiled my interview down to 6 questions. It was 5 on Java and 1 on troubleshooting a poorly performing database query, but I had it absolutely clocked. I knew that the breadth and depth of those questions, though limited, gave me enough technical insight to have high confidence that this person would succeed or do well in an interview. So the questions that I'm using are battle-tested, proven questions of inquiry that have been tested in the field for decades before I even deployed TechScreen. So TechScreen now with AI Verify is effectively an extension of myself, but now it's at scale with AI.
Yeah. I can only imagine your excitement when you saw the capabilities of generative AI on how you can integrate it into your product, which you have worked on for decades, and now you can bring it to the next level.
Oh yeah, and what the thing that really blows me away as someone who began my career with using words because as a writer and editor, I was blown away that it would actually give analysis to an answer the way a hiring manager would. For example, there's another interview that I did where it asked the question, "What's a class loader in Java?" and give me examples of different types of class loaders. And there's 4 different types: extensions, bootstrap, plugin, and system, right? And so the
Yeah.
candidate gave, I think, bootstrap extension and said application. And what AI Verify did was that even though the word application and the word system are clearly not the same, the system considered the definitions of the words and said, and just like a hiring manager said, oh, okay, yeah, I said application, but clearly he was saying system because he wasn't confusing it with the plugin or the extension of the bootstrap class loader. He was confusing it with the system class loader. And since they're analogous, we're going to give them credit. So AI Verify is able to make decisions like that. And there was another one where they talked about difference between an array list and linked list. And in one of the terms we saw in the database described it as an index-based system, where in the candidate's answer they chose the word dynamic array. But again, AI Verify correctly gave the candidate credit because a dynamic array is in itself an index-based construct. So while you might assume that because a lot of times systems that use keywords to help render decisions on things or trigger actions, there needs to be a deadbolt one-to-one match for the candidate's answer and what's in the database. But AI Verify is intuitively intelligent and will make decisions that mirror what a development manager would do in the real world. Because a dev manager would have done the same thing. He's like, okay, he's used dynamic array. He just chose another way to explain it because it sure as hell is an index-based system. So that was a thing that I got super jacked about, because it's one thing to find a correct term in the database and match it with the term the candidate used verbatim. But it's not a perfect world, and candidates can explain the same concept with different terms, and AI Verify intelligently can understand the nuance between the two, but if as long as they mean the same thing, it's going to give credit to the candidate. So that was the thing that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, it totally makes sense. And you mentioned that TechScreen is the platform which lets recruiters to save their time and do not miss out on the candidates which are actually valuable. And
Yeah. Oh, with
I'm just
ab-
rather interested. Do
mhm.
you think that TechScreen is is better fit for in-house hiring managers or for vendors who bring the
It's for both.
candidates for,
It's for both.
yeah, companies?
Absolutely, it's for both. As a matter of fact, I'll give you a great example. One of our, because we do most of our business with staffing companies, but early on we had a large software company, and because they have a bunch of lawyers, I'm not going to say their name, but it doesn't really matter for the purpose of this conversation, right? So they were piloting us. This was early on. This is way before we had AI, and they had two junior recruiters, and they hired a lot of young people, so they did a lot of phone screens, or would throw a lot of resumes at the team leads. So the team lead went in, and they defined a .NET interview, and they said, okay, if somebody does really well on this one, we want to talk to them. So they wound up screening in 2 months. These two recruiters screened 155 candidates, which led to the managers doing 40 formal interviews. They made 20, bless you, they made 28
Thank you.
full-time offers. That was a 70% interview to offer ratio. And what's interesting is that if you recall when I had those 80 hires on 117 subs, that was a 68% interview to offer ratio. So two junior recruiters using our platform beat me by 2 percentage points of what I did as a consultant in 2000. What the heck? In 2009, and so it's easily it can be employed by either the corporate tech recruiter or the staffing recruiter. But at the end of the day, it does the same thing. It's providing concrete evidence to the manager who can consume this evidence in the same window of time they're accustomed to doing candidate assessment, because they don't have unlimited time to read resumes and information about whether this person is worth a phone screen. But if they could still take, say, that 20 to 30 seconds to consume some information about the candidate, but they could do it largely relying on the analysis that's in AI Verify and say, okay, this guy's resume wasn't much to write home about, but holy cow, does he understand the runtime environment? Now I really want to talk to this one, which is all that
Especially if
they
you've
care about.
responded, yeah, and also if the candidate responded well to the question about the purpose of garbage collection in Java, then
Boom.
that's a
It,
perfect match
it, yeah, that's
immediately.
exactly right. Exactly right.
Hmm. And actually, I can say from my experience working with AI models extensively, they are getting just weirdly smarter at the extremely fast pace. So, having this information, where do you see the future of TechScreen, and what new features perhaps you are thinking of incorporating or enhancing the existing propositions?
Well, actually, I'm glad that you mentioned the corporate TA, because we focus so much of our time and effort on the staffing side, but our roadmap includes other solutions that will help on the corporate TA side, because you think about, especially in periods where there's fewer opportunities and there's a lot of people looking, so they apply, I'm sure, to a lot of jobs online. In the way applicant tracking systems are designed, more and more of them are using AI to weed people out, or to make a list of a ranked list of the ones whose resumes seem to have the most buzzwords for this particular position. And And so um, we're going to provide solutions that will let um, you go through the database. And because so many companies, they spend a fortune on sourcing tools like LinkedIn Recruiter and ZoomInfo and HireEZ and all these very expensive tools. And they spend a lot of money on job postings where companies could dramatically slash their spend on those sourcing tools and use a tool like AI Verify to go harvest their own database. Companies spend a lot of money to fill their applicant tracking systems. But for some weird reason, Max, companies are under some illusion that some candidate who exists out in the world, who's never heard of our companies, never applied for a job at us, is somehow more inherently valuable than the person who's applied to 3 jobs at this company in the last 27 months and for one reason or another just never really surfaced, right? If they were candidate, if they were the 86th candidate to apply for some front end Java job, but in the first 50 submittals, the recruiter found 10 people who were no brainer to call, and 6 of them were submitted to the manager. They're not worrying about who was candidate number 150 who applied for this job. I have to worry about this other data engineer job who's not getting much attraction because it's kind of supporting an old legacy system that's very unsexy. Now I'm going to have to go and find people for this because if the manager who has the UI job, they're drowning in good candidates. I don't need to continue looking through the ATS for, and there are so many people who just die on the vine inside an applicant tracking system for reasons like that. So our tool, we have one product in mind, a new version, 6.0. It's called AI Validate. That's going to let companies harvest their own ATSs at scale with great efficiency, and at the same time dramatically cut the money they're spending on tools, especially LinkedIn Recruiter. Do you know that I've heard from clients that there are some companies who are paying as much as $15,000 for one license of LinkedIn Recruiter? 15 grand, that's almost like a placement fee. And so we're going to save companies a fortune in sourcing and job posting by simply allowing them to harvest the gold mine that they're sitting on in their own applicant tracking system.
Yeah, that's gonna be super valuable, and actually, the companies are very keen on integrating AI in this area because I'm currently working with other client, and they approached me asking to build the system which automates certain processes of hiring process. Yeah, with some well, they just wanted to have some procedures they are now doing manually, such as screening the candidate, figuring
Yep.
out whether he is a fit based on the job description and requirements, just having all this done as much as possible and as accurately as possible with AI. And I see where this gap can be breached perfectly with TechScreen, especially considering the amount of experience, knowledge, and
Absolutely.
value you have during all these years of development.
Oh, without question. And and the other thing too is a lot, and the other benefit for a company who's using their own database to in the agency world, it's like reactivate candidates, right?
Yeah.
So imagine if there was some person, and we'll use that front end Java job profile as an example. So some person applied 27 months ago to this company, and their resume just didn't bubble to the surface for any number of different reasons. Now imagine if the company who wanted to continue to leverage their existing investment in their own ATS, they made it a purpose of reactivating people. Even let's say they're not hiring aggressively for this position right now, but it's the kind of position that's a recurring, or what they call a greenfield, an evergreen
Yeah.
position, meaning they always come up. And so, how about reaching out to past candidates? Said, hey, listen, we know you've applied for a position in the past. We're sorry the timing didn't quite work out, but we always want to look at candidates who've taken an interest in us. We'd like to screen you for future positions that we expect are going to be coming up around the corner. And so, would you be willing to talk with one of our recruiters? And so now, bang, guess what happens? New resume. Because one of the complaints people have about ATSs is there's all these old dated resumes. Well, if you don't talk with them and interact with them, of course you're going to have the resume that came in that day they applied. So it now allows companies and gives them an excuse to refresh their own database and update candidate records in a way that the candidates want to be engaged with them more. They were hearing from a company they thought ghosted them 2.5+ years ago. But now you're re-engaging with people who took the time to apply for jobs. And again, spare your money on more sourcing tools, because you could probably talk with the candidates in your database for the next 5 years and not have to post any jobs out there to get new blood. Harvest your own gold mine. And so few companies are actually trying to do that.
Yeah, and extent to which it's possible to make it automated is insane. So they can
Yep.
harvest their own gold mine without the need to have the shovel, in their hands all the time.
Yes,
So
that's it.
mhm.
That's exactly right. And what a great metaphor.
Fantastic. I think we could be talking about AI in business, AI implemented in TechScreen solution for ages, but we are a
Yes.
bit constrained by the time. Therefore, I
Yep.
just would love to ask you to provide maybe some couple of extra things if you want. We have 2 more minutes, whatever you want,
Okay.
whatever you would
Well,
like.
yeah. So if anyone's interested in learning more about us, obviously our website techscreen.com. I frequently post things on my LinkedIn, so find me on LinkedIn, both my personal profile and our company profile. But I will often make short form video content that illustrates some salient point, and I'm going to be doing more and more of that, and to give more visual evidence of how we're helping solving real world problems being faced by recruiters. And if I may just go back, I've spoken a lot about corporate TA, but in particular the staffing industry is something I'm deeply passionate about, because do you know that the staffing industry has profit margins between, like, say, 4 and 5%? Most service industries have profit margins that are probably between 20 and 50%. But it's because those low hit rates, that numbers we
Mhm.
discussed at the beginning, a 13 to
Yeah.
1 submittal to start ratio. We want to help staffing companies more effectively service their clients and lower performance based attrition. Because you know what happens when you have a 13 to 1 submittal to start ratio? Over almost 92% of the time the recruiter needed to make those submittals just got thrown into a black hole. So we want to help staffing companies monetize more of the time that they're committing to make their submittals, and for salespeople to get more meetings with their clients, because they can demonstrate greater capability, they can screen more effectively, that we can actually have an impact on performance-based attrition in staffing. And so we see AI Verify as being one of those, like, high tide brings up all boats. We want to do that for recruiters who are working on IT positions, whether you work in staffing or whether you work in corporate TA. If you're hiring a lot of IT people, we want high tide theory to be applied across the board.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's a very interesting initiative, and I just want to say to our viewers, thanks for their attention. Thank you, Mark, for being so so generous on information and on the things which TechScreen is solving, especially right now in the modern world where the information is moving with insane speed.
Yes.
And all the links to Mark's and TechScreen's social media are in the description. Press
Hmm.
the like button, subscribe, press the bell button. That's actually very important for YouTube, as I have recently discovered. And yeah, yeah. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, viewers, and see you in the next podcast.
All right. Well, Max, thank you so much for your time. I'm just super passionate about this, and I just want to see recruiters play a more effective role in fulfilling their missions, both on the staffing and the corporate TA side, because empty seats are costing companies money. We want to shorten that span as long as we can, as short as we can.
Mhm. All right. So again, all the links in the description, and stay tuned.